The Legend of Zelda has some of the darkest lore in gaming, and most of it is hiding in plain sight. Beneath the colorful art style, there are theories so disturbing they fundamentally change how you see the entire franchise. Today I'm breaking down the scariest Zelda theories that actually make sense, starting with one that quietly rewrites the history of an entire race. The interlopers are the Gerudo. If you've played Twilight Princess, you know the interlopers. A mysterious group of dark magic users who tried to claim the sacred realm, got banished to the Twilight Realm, and eventually became the Twili. But here's the thing, nobody ever tells you who they were before the banishment, except the game kind of does. The Gerudo are desert-dwelling outsiders, excluded from Hylian society. The interlopers are described as outcasts who wielded forbidden power. Both groups are associated with dark magic. Both produce leaders who tried to seize the sacred realm. Ganondorf literally attempts the exact same thing the interlopers did, just a few thousand years later. Twilight Princess takes place over 10,000 years after Skyward Sword. That's more than enough time for an entire species to physically transform in a realm with zero sunlight. Nintendo has never confirmed this, but the connections are so tight, it's hard to call it coincidence. If this theory is right, Twilight Princess told us how Gerudo died, but if one race's hidden fate unsettles you, wait until you hear what the Zonai did to themselves. The Zonai consumed themselves. Here's what's unsettling about the Zonai. It's not that they died, it's that they left behind ruins, technology, entire floating islands, and almost zero people to explain any of it. Think about that for a second. This is a civilization advanced enough to build floating islands, create perpetual energy sources, and engineer technology that still functions thousands of years later. They built everything, and then they just vanished. You can find their ruins scattered across the Faron region, crumbling stonework covered in dragon motif. The Sky Islands are pristine architecture with zero occupant. It's like walking into a fully furnished house where dinner's still on the table, but nobody's home. And nobody's been home for millennia. Tears of the Kingdom reveals that most of the Zonai returned to the heavens, leaving only Rauru and Mineru behind. An entire civilization just packed up and left 2 people to hold down the fort, which is, you know, not ideal. Rauru then married the Hylian Sonia, meaning whatever Zonai blood remained in the world got folded into the Hylian royal line, an advanced species reduced to a footnote in someone else's family tree. That's not extinction, that's a slow, quiet fade into someone else's story. But if one vanished civilization creeps you out, wait until you hear about the dead tribe that didn't disappear, became a mask. Majora's Mask is a dead, ancient tribe. Most people treat Majora's Mask like it's a cursed object, a really powerful, really evil hat, but that's not what's happening. The mask isn't an item, it's a graveyard, and every time Skull Kid puts it on, an entire civilization is screaming through him. Here's the thing, the game tells you the mask came from an ancient tribe that used it in hexing rituals, and then those people just vanished, gone. No ruins, no descendants, no follow-up. But the mask itself, it's still hungry. It manipulates Skull Kid like a puppet, expresses preferences, shows fear when threatened with exorcism. That's not cursed object behavior, that's possession. That's a collective consciousness wearing a child like a suit. And then there's the happy mask salesman. This guy somehow had the mask, lost it, and desperately needs it back. But he never explains how he got it, or why he's so terrified of it being loose. Was he its creator? Its jailer? Nobody knows, and the game seems perfectly content never telling you. The worst part is the implication. If the mask is the tribe, then their consciousness didn't pass on. It got trapped. Every scream, every manipulation, every apocalyptic tantrum Skull Kid throws is an entire people raging against their own extinction. Which is, you know, not ideal. But if a dead civilization piloting a child's body sounds bad, wait until you hear what happened to the hero of time after he died. The hero's shade. In the Zelda universe, if a Hylian gets lost in the Lost Woods, they don't just die, they rot. Their flesh falls away, their bones harden, and they become a Stalfos, a skeleton that wanders the woods with no memory of who they were. Most Stalfos follow this pattern. No thoughts, no personality, no identity. Just bones swinging a sword at anything that moves. The Lost Woods variety are completely gone, which makes the hero's shade in Twilight Princess so unsettling. The hero's shade is a spectral warrior who teaches Link 7 hidden skills. He moves with tactical precision. He speaks in full sentences. He expresses genuine emotional regret about a life he feels was wasted because nobody remembered him as a hero. Hyrule Historia confirmed that the hero's shade is the hero of time himself, the Link from Ocarina of Time. After his adventure, he was sent back to his childhood timeline, where nobody knew what he'd done. He lived, he died, and his spirit lingered, unable to move on because his legacy died with him. He waited centuries, literal centuries, as an undead spirit, just to pass his combat knowledge to a successor who might actually be remembered for saving the world. The greatest hero in Zelda history didn't get a statue or a legacy. He got to linger as a restless ghost and hope somebody showed up eventually, which is, you know, not ideal. But if you think one tragic spirit is dark, wait until you see what Hyrule was doing to living people inside the Shadow Temple. The Shadow Temple is a torture chamber. Let's talk about the fact that Nintendo, a company that makes games for children, put an explicit torture dungeon in Ocarina of Time and nobody stopped them. The Shadow Temple isn't a dungeon in any traditional sense. There's no logic to it. No protect the treasure layout, no keep intruders out. Design philosophy, it's just pain. 6 distinct sections of pure, gratuitous suffering. Spiked platforms, guillotine traps, hanging corpses, chandeliers made of bone. And then, because apparently that wasn't enough, they added Dead Hand. Dead Hand is a mini-boss that has zero combat logic. It's just a torso with multiple skeletal arms reaching out of the ground to grab you. It exists for one reason: to make you deeply uncomfortable. Mission accomplished, Nintendo. The dungeon's backstory references unspecified evil experiments conducted during Ganondorf's reign, which is the game's way of saying we can't tell you what happened here because this is rated E, but the architecture tells you everything. Half the traps in this place serve no defensive purpose whatsoever. They're not protecting anything. They're not stopping intruders. They're designed to inflict suffering on people who are already trapped inside. This isn't a fortress. It's a psychological horror set piece disguised as a water temple alternative, and it was in a game marketed to 10-year-olds, which is, you know, not ideal. But if the Shadow Temple's design disturbed you, wait until you find out what the Redeeds actually are. The Redeeds are human corpses. This one isn't even a theory. The games practically spell it out for you. In Majora's Mask, the Gibdo Mask lets you talk to Redeeds, and when you do, they respond like people. They have thoughts. They have requests. They react to you like someone trapped inside a nightmare they can't wake up from. Not implied through vague environmental storytelling, directly communicated through gameplay, which means every single Redeed you've ever fought, every gray-skinned, hollow-eyed, screaming corpse that latched onto Link and drained his life force might have been a person. Look at their design. Skeletal faces, humanoid proportions, gray, decaying skin stretched over a frame that is unmistakably human-shaped. These aren't monsters that evolved in some dungeon. They're people, or they were, and their behavior backs this up. Redeeds don't guard anything. They don't patrol. They just sit there, motionless, until something alive gets close enough. Then they scream, paralyze you, and latch on to drain your life and magic. That's not defensive behavior. That's hunger. That's a cursed thing desperately trying to take back what it lost. Now, the debate is whether every Redeed shares this origin, or if the ones in Termina were special cases. But here's the thing. If even some of them were confirmed to have human awareness, the burden of proof shift. You now have to explain why the rest of them, identical in every way, somehow aren't, and nobody's been able to do that convincingly. Every Redeed you casually cuts down beneath Ikana might have been screaming for help, but if that makes you uncomfortable, wait until you hear what the gods themselves did to an entire civilization. The Great Flood. Wind Waker is one of the most beloved Zelda games ever made. Bright colors, cel-shaded art, a kid in a lobster shirt sailing around with a talking boat. It's adorable. It's also hiding the single darkest event in the entire franchise, and nobody seems to care, because the art style is too cute to question. Here's what actually happened. Ganondorf returned, and the gods couldn't stop it. So instead of fighting him, instead of sealing him, instead of doing literally anything targeted, they flooded the entire world. Not a region, not a kingdom. The entire surface of Hyrule, submerged under an ocean. Every town, every village, every family that didn't make it to the mountaintops, gone. And this isn't speculation. Wind Waker's opening narration tells you directly. The gods told a chosen few to flee to the highest peak, which became the scattered islands of the Great Sea. Everyone else, just ruins and fish. The Hylians, as a civilization, were functionally shattered, reduced to small pockets on tiny islands, who eventually forgot they were ever Hylian at all. Think about that. The gods, the supposed protectors of Hyrule, made a deliberate choice to annihilate an entire kingdom. Not Ganondorf, not Demise, the good guys. They looked at the situation and said, yeah, let's just drown everything. That's easier, which is, you know, not ideal. And the best part, the game never frames this as a tragedy. It frames it as a fresh start. Cheerful music, new islands, fun adventure. The ocean is literally a mass grave, and you're sailing across it collecting treasure maps. But if divine war crimes aren't unsettling enough for you, wait until you hear what's actually happening on Satori Mountain. The Bloopies are Satori's victims. You know those cute little glowing rabbit things in Breath of the Wild? The ones you chase for rupees like a lunatic before they vanish into thin air? Yeah. They might be trapped souls. Here's what we know. Bloopies appear all over Hyrule, but there's exactly one place where they congregate in massive numbers, Satori Mountain. Specifically, they cluster around a glowing cherry blossom tree at the mountain's peak, which functions as a shrine to the mountain's namesake, the Lord of the Mountain, Satori himself, a spectral deer-like deity who appears only at night, bathed in an otherworldly glow. And Satori is dead. The game's loading screen tips explicitly describe him as a deceased spirit. He's not resting, he's not hibernating. He died before Link ever woke up, and his ghost just lingers on the mountaintop surrounded by dozens of glowing creatures that refuse to leave. Now here's where it gets unsettling. Nobody knows what Bloopies actually are. There's zero canonical explanation for their origin. They're not animals, they're not fairies. They don't eat, they don't breed. They don't do anything except gather around the shrine of a dead god and occasionally scatter when a Hylian sprints at them for pocket change. The theory is simple. Satori's followers were transformed into Bloopies, either by Satori himself to preserve them after his death, or as a consequence of his passing. Either way, these adorable little creatures that players smack with arrows for 100 rupees might be conscious souls permanently bound to a mountain, worshipping a god who can never release them, which is, you know, Not ideal, but at least their god is just dead. The next entity on this list might actually still be pulling strings, and nobody even knows what he is. The Happy Mask Salesman is a god. Let's talk about the most unsettling character in the entire Zelda franchise. Not a boss, not a demon, a shopkeeper. The Happy Mask Salesman appears in Ocarina of Time, hangs around for 7 years while the world collapses and doesn't age a single day. Fine, maybe he moisturizes, but then he shows up in Termina, an entirely separate universe with zero explanation for how he got there. He knows about Majora's Mask, knows what it does, knows the supernatural catastrophe it's about to cause, and he knows all of this before any of it happens. He appears and disappears instantaneously. No horse, no portal, no magic spell, just gone, like he was never there. He recovers one of the most dangerous artifacts in the franchise from Skull Kid, like someone picking up a dropped wallet. No fight, no ritual, no effort. Here's the thing that really gets under your skin. His name is never revealed. His origin is never explained. His purpose is never stated. Nintendo has had decades and multiple games to clarify who this man is, and they've chosen silence every single time. That's not an oversight. That's a decision. And when you step back and look at the structure of Majora's Mask, something clicked. Link isn't the one driving the story. The salesman sends Link after the mask. The salesman needs it recovered. The salesman benefits from every single thing Link does. The most powerful entity in the franchise isn't wielding a sword or sitting on a throne. He's running a shop and smiling, which is, not ideal. But at least he's just standing there being cryptic. Ganondorf's situation in Breath of the Wild is so much worse, because he might actually be feeling every second of it. The malice is Ganondorf's conscious agony. Most people think of Ganondorf as the big evil guy who keeps coming back because he's angry. But here's a reading of his character that will genuinely ruin your day. He's not coming back because he wants to. He's coming back because he can't stop. Malice, that gross purple-black goo, coating everything in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, isn't just a gameplay hazard. It's described as Ganondorf's hatred given physical form. His will made manifest, which sounds like standard villain stuff until you think about it for more than 3 seconds, because malice isn't mindless. It moves with intent. It reforms around destroyed calamities. It seeks out specific locations tied to Ganondorf's defeats and anchors itself there. It behaves less like a substance and more like something that's aware, something that's looking for a way out. Now consider this. Across multiple games, Ganondorf is shown to be fully conscious during his defeats. He doesn't just die. He watches himself lose, feels the sealing magic close around him, and stays awake inside it. For centuries, sometimes millennia. So, if malice is his will made tangible, and his consciousness persists after every physical death, then every single pool of malice the player casually walks through is essentially someone screaming. Not a monster, not a force of nature. A man trapped in an endless loop of dying, reforming, and suffering, with his agony literally leaking out of his prison and poisoning the world around him. He's not the villain. He's the punishment, which is, not ideal. But if you think eternal conscious torment is dark, wait until we talk about what actually happened to Link in Majora's Mask. Link is dead in Majora's Mask. This is the theory that fundamentally broke how an entire generation sees Majora's Mask. And once you hear it, you can't unhear it. The game opens with Skull Kid ambushing Link, knocking him off Epona, and sending him plummeting into a bottomless void. He wakes up transformed into a Deku Scrub. Most players accept this as, oh cool, magic curse, and move on. But think about what actually happened. A child fell into an endless abyss and woke up in a body that isn't his, in a world that isn't real, surrounded by people who are all going to die in 3 days. Every single one of them. The bomber's notebook tracks 20 NPCs across Termina, and unless Link personally intervenes in their lives, most of them end up in misery, loss, or worse when that moon comes down. Death isn't the exception in Termina. It's the default state. The moon falls, Clocktown is obliterated, and you reset. Over and over and over. The entire color palette is darker than Ocarina of Time. The Poe Collector speaks about death like it's an inevitability nobody can escape. The atmosphere doesn't feel like an adventure. It feels like a funeral that keeps restarting. The theory argues that Link didn't survive that fall. That Termina isn't another dimension. It's the afterlife. Every 3-day reset isn't time travel. It's Link reliving his own death, trapped in a loop he can't escape until he finally lets go. Now, there's no line of dialogue that says you are dead. The text stays deliberately ambiguous, but the thematic evidence is so overwhelming that it stopped being a theory for a lot of people and just became the way the game worked. And if you think that interpretation is dark, the next theory takes it even further. The Termina, 5 stages of grief. Every theory on this list has been about something hidden in the lore, the code, or the world design. This one is about you. Termina's 3-day cycle isn't just a gameplay mechanic, it's a grief simulator. Day 1, everyone goes about their business. The shops are open, the guards are posted, the carnival preparations continue. The moon is right there, hanging in the sky like a tumor, and nobody acknowledges it. That's denial. Day 2, the tension breaks. Conflicts escalate, tempers flare, relationships fracture under the weight of what's coming. That's anger. Day 3, the streets empty. Characters write letters. They hold each other. They stop fighting and start saying goodbye. That's acceptance. The Bomber's Notebook tracks all of this. Every NPC has a documented emotional arc across the cycle, and you watch each one move through their own version of the same process. Anju waits for Cafe. The postman can't abandon his schedule. The Romani ranch sisters argue about whether to tell the younger one she's going to die. And then the moon falls, everyone dies, and you reset the clock and do it all again. Here's what makes this the most devastating theory in Zelda. There's zero explicit textual evidence for the Kubler-Ross framework. Nobody at Nintendo sat down and said, let's map the 5 stages of grief onto a 3-day cycle, but the design does it anyway. Skull Kid refuses responsibility for what he's done. The final hours sequence plays out like collective surrender. The entire world grieves its own extinction, and you're standing in the middle of it with an ocarina that can only delay the inevitable. The horror isn't in the enemies or the curses, it's in the design itself. You can save individuals, but you can never save everyone. Not once, not ever. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.